everyone, let's talk about the Google Algo update, the helpful content update. So let's talk about what it is, what we know about it, what they have said about it, and then my thoughts on each of the guidelines. All right, so I had to make myself notes for this one. So if I look down, I'm actually reading my notes because this is actually a lot of information. So let's just dive right in. So Google's always been super helpful to us, right? Where they do release updates, but they do give us some information. Now, when you start to read and look at the information, you realize that it's extremely subjective. So that I may read it one way, another SEO with different types of experience will read it another way. So a lot of times you'll see people complain that SEOs don't all agree, and it's because it's really subjective. And when I read a particular sentence or a guideline, I might read into it a little bit different than somebody else. Now, the helpful content update is still new. We're still learning from it, and there's still a whole lot to uncover. So whatever I say about it today, next year, I might have a completely different opinion and different steps in helping a site recover. So let's talk about what we do know and what it means to me as I start to decipher and apply it to site. All right, so the helpful content update was actually first released on August 25th, according to Google and their notes. You can pull up all of the notes that Google releases for every single update and their description of it and what they're looking for. Now, I'm not going to say it's super helpful because it is written very vaguely, but it is a good starting point if you have a site that is not doing well. Okay, so I mentioned it was released on August 25th. We have been notified that it was also released on December 5th, and it's not so much a release where they're just releasing the whole thing over and over again, the way that we're used to some of the other updates. It's more of an update to the release. And in fact, Google calls the brains of the helpful content update the classifier. At least that's how I read it, where it is fully automated. It is running all of the time, and it is constantly learning. They have told us at least that much. They have said that this is not a manual action, and to think of the helpful content as more of a ranking signal. So the problem with this is that it's constantly running and it's learning. To me, that means whatever triggers the helpful content update this year, something different will be triggering it next year because it's learning and it's always in progress. So however we are treating sites this year to help recover from the helpful content will be different to how we're treating it next year because we will be learning about it, but also it's in progress and learning and getting better with time. Now, that makes it difficult for us to pinpoint dates if it's running all of the time. So what I think we're going to start running into are sites that have been hit with the helpful update, but we won't be able to correlate the date specifically and know it's the helpful content update. So whatever we discuss to help sites with, if you have a site that's been hit and you're not quite sure what it's been hit with, you're going to have to apply some of what we talk about in other updates, like the helpful content update, to the site, whether it's been hit by the helpful content update or not, to make sure that if that was the culprit, you would be fixing it. Now, something interesting about this update that really is not so interesting, but they let us know that sites can recover from this update. So if your site has been hit, it can recover. However, if you read this particular document and you even read some of the tweets that they put out, you'll start to realize that yes, it can recover, but there's some sort of time frame. They haven't particularly really pointed out, but they kind of vaguely mention that if you've been hit, you can do everything necessary to recover it, and it will take a few months to actually recover, even if you've already done all of the correct things. So there is some type of gap or time period in between working on the site, doing everything that is needed, and then actually getting the site to recover. Now, to me, they've been pretty vague on it. In one part of the correspondence, it does say a few months. Does that mean 2? Does it mean 3? I'm not really sure. They're kind of vague, but it tells me that magically, if you do everything on Friday, magically your site's not going to be back on Saturday or Monday, but it's going to take a few months, whatever that means exactly to them. So that's something to be mindful of as you're working on site. So they have also let us know, and they is Google, by the way, that this particular helpful content update currently only being applied to the English queries or the English search for now. It will launch into other countries, I'm assuming, once they like what they see and it's doing what they think it should be doing, then they would start to deploy into other languages. Now, this particular update is like applying a filter to the website. They did tell you, as I mentioned before, it's more of a ranking signal to them, not a manual action or anything like that. And they mentioned that it's like applying a filter to your site so that it's filtered so that you're not ranking for the keywords that your site is intended to rank for. So they kind of stifle or filter the site. So they're pushing you down in rankings, which is why a lot of times we see that cliff chart that I showed you in the last video. If you're not sure if your site has been hit, check out my last video about what it looks like when a site has actually been hit. And that's why we see such a drastic decrease in traffic. All right, so here is more of the fun part. They actually give you guidelines, or they call them guidelines, of what they want to see in your content or what you should be mindful in your content, and then what you should avoid in your content. Now, they write this, I feel, very vague and very subjective, so that, like I said, if I read it one way, someone else is going to come behind me and read it a different way. So what I like to do with each of the updates is look at this first, get the guidelines in my head and what they mean to me, write it all down. What does that mean to me? What would I do to a site with that particular guideline? Or what would I look for? And then we're constantly learning as SEOs. So I pour over what everyone else is saying about the update because they're going to have a different viewpoint and they might find something that I didn't find. So it's important to pay attention to what everyone is saying. However, you have to be able to systemize it on your own. And does it make sense to you? Because sometimes people mention things that are a little bit outlandish. So here are my thoughts on what is going on with this particular update. They gave us the vague guidelines of what they want to see and what they don't want to see. And then I made myself a list of what does that mean to me and what would that mean and look like on a site. And don't worry, I have some examples to show you of what I'm talking about. So when you read through these, the first thing that popped in my mind was we need to start paying more attention to EAT. Now, we've talked about EAT through the years and it's evolved with the information that we know about it. And as I went back over the helpful content update, I went back to EAT, everything that they've said about it, because EAT is mentioned in this guideline. Let me read this one sentence to you when I started picking it up is, does your content clearly demonstrate firsthand expertise and a depth of knowledge? For example, expertise that comes from having actually used the product. Are you qualified to write about this product? That to me falls back on EAT. And when I went back over it, I realized that we have been missing some of the pieces, or I just haven't heard them talked about. And so that's going to have to come in another video where we discuss EAT entirely. And I might even have to break it into multiple videos because it is a lot of information. But let me just quickly show you one example before I move on to the next point. So EAT at the most basic level. Let's talk about a few things. And then I owe you a video that's way more complicated that talks a lot more about EAT and all of the little possibilities in between. But this is just a really quick check that you can do on the site. So I pulled up a site that was ranking for best pasta makers. I think it was ranking on the second page. It's the Gear Lab, Tech Gear Lab website. I have seen the site before and I knew them more for electronics and tech type gear, but they've branched into kitchen, health, home and garden, and all kinds of different topics. But real quick, you can pull up the site, make sure you have an about page. It's super superficial and quick. But why are you writing these types of reviews? Who are you? What are you doing? Why is this your expertise? Now, this particular site has a really well-written about page. And then the next point that you're going to check is your actual writer of the article. Who are they? Why are they an expert to write on this particular subject? So she wrote about a pasta maker. What makes her capable or the expert in pasta makers? Now, this particular site, although they have done really, really well. This particular author that's writing about pasta makers, if you read what her background is, it doesn't really convince me that she is an expert in pasta makers, because really the only part of this is that she's kitchen obsessed and a home cook. But her background is actually in television, film, and they go on to list what university she went to, and then that she switched gears since then, and now she's pursuing fisheries and wildlife, which really tells me nothing about pasta makers or why she's such an obsessed home cook. What I wanted to see here was a little bit more about how many years has she been cooking? What is the specialty in her cooking? And what is her actual background that she would be writing about pasta makers or kitchen gadgets? Now, in the second paragraph, they go on a little bit better so that they actually say she has 10 years of experience in the food and beverage industry. Now, I wasn't so sure of that in the first paragraph, but they did tell us in the second paragraph. I would be a little bit nitpicky, and in your author bios, I would be upfront about the food and industry part before I start talking about television and fisheries and wildlife. However, she might be writing other articles on the site about fish or something in the film and production niche. I didn't search the whole site to find out, so they might have to broadly cover her in a few different areas. I just wish they had done the food and beverage in the first paragraph instead of waiting until the second, but that's super, super nitpicky. And you could even say, the content update is a machine and is constantly learning. So it's not an actual human reading this. But let's take this one step further and how I believe the machine learning is taking place. All right. So something that you can do really quickly is take a look and Google the author name. Now, there's many different ways to do this search. This is not the only one. This actually goes more in depth than this, but I'm going to save that for another video when we're really talking fully in the entire video about each. Now, when I Googled her name, there are other articles that came up. She is writing for another type of website that is related or centered around kitchen or food. So her name is in search for other types of articles that she says she's an expert of. Now, I don't believe anyone's manually reading any of this. Google has let us know that this is machine learning or constantly learning, and it's not manual. So how would a machine be able to know if this particular writer writes or is understood as being a food blogger or a food expert or recipe tester, or however you want to describe it? How are we going to spider out and know if it's only machine learning? And I believe they're using search or a type of way to connect her back to what she says she's an expert in. Now, I'm going to show you a second site and run the same search on that particular author. This is also about the best pasta maker, and this one was on the third page of Google. And when I looked for this particular writer, now right here, she has her author name, and they have a tiny author bio about her so that I could read a little bit more. And it says she is an expert when it comes to all things pasta. She's an expert, so she must be, right? She's been making fresh pasta since she was little. That's what qualified her as a pasta expert. And making pasta your entire life probably would qualify you, in my eyes, to be a pasta maker. However, remember, no one's manually reading this. But how could we tell really quickly if this particular author is qualified to write about pasta makers. So I just did a really quick search on her name. And remember, there's more ways to do the search. This is not the end all be all type of search. But when I did a search for her name, what pops up is the website that I was on, and then Ancestry stuff and Facebook stuff, but nothing that was related to cooking, nothing that was related to recipes, nothing that was related to pasta making. So she's been making it her entire life, but she's never really written for anything else. And she's not in search for that niche on any other websites. That to me would be a problem for that particular site. Now, like I said, this is not the end all be all way to tell, and I'm going to have to develop another video to dive only into EAT because it's such a large topic on its own. But this was something really fast that you can do to your site to see if you're actually qualified to talk about what you're qualifying for. So on a lot of our affiliate sites, we say we're experts because we've been making pasta for 20 years, but how does the algo know that you're an expert to write on that topic? And that's where we need to start paying a lot more attention. Now, the big sites that do really well and have all types of authority, they pay for really good writers that really do have those backgrounds. So they're covering EAT in a really full capacity type of way. Now, there are ways to do this on sites that aren't really big, that don't have really large budgets. And I'm going to talk about that in other videos because I know not every site can afford the top 5 or 6 writers in every single category that you are trying to produce. So let's go back through the list. That was just one thing that I wanted to cover really quick on EAT, and it wasn't even that quick. The next set, when I started reading through the qualifications, focus on people first content. You can't get any more vague than that in my eyes. But reading through what they want to see, the next focus that I had on this, and the next note that I have for myself, is the primary focus of the site. And I want you to think about topical relevance. How are you covering your topic? So the topic over here was pasta makers. How is this site covering this topically? And you look at it in different ways, how they're actually covering it. So for instance, is this a tech website that has just a handful of pasta or weird kitchen pages that don't really match the subject matter? Or have they taken this kitchen topic, fully fleshed it out, and have topical relevance throughout the site for the kitchen gadgets? Now, this particular site, Gear Lab, when I started clicking through and taking a look at the site, they have developed some nice kitchen type material, and it is covered well throughout the site, meaning there is support throughout the site for that particular niche. It's not just about tech and gear labs. Now, if I was looking at the site and they had been hit or in trouble, and I'm looking at the posts and the pages of the site, and you have 500 posts of tech and then 10 posts of kitchen, that tells me we're not fully developing the kitchen topic properly, and that we can either fully develop it, which is going to take a lot of time, or you can remove it from the site. Now, there are sites that start to recover or do really well when you remove a lot of the non-topic type material. So if you have a site and you're just kind of talking about everything, you know, you've got Christmas stocking stuffers, you've got kitchen gadgets, you have tech, you have lawnmowers, whatever it is, if you're scattering yourself out too much and you're not fully developing a topic, that's going to be an issue for you, and you're going to want to check into that. A good way to do that is getting an idea of every single page and every single post. What is the title and what are you writing about? Do you see anything that sticks out to you that's not on topic? Most sites you can find a little bit of off topic or an area they maybe thought about diving into, but then just fully didn't develop it. And if you see something like that, you're going to want to redirect it or remove it or fully develop it. So with that particular comment, what you want to make sure is that you're fully developing the entire topic across the site and not just on that one page. Now, Next is, what do you have that's different on your page that's different from your competitors? And the way that I grab this data is I take a look at your competitors, or I take a look at my competitors, and then I take a look at their actual content. So for the best pasta makers is Tech Gear Lab. What are they sharing? What is the basis of their information? What type of information are they giving you? And have they fully developed it? Are they sharing something that nobody else is sharing? And are you sharing something that nobody else is sharing? And an easy way to do that is look at the FAQs. Are there FAQs that no one has thought about yet? Or are there FAQs that haven't fully been covered on your site? Are there statistics that you can fall back on? Statistics can sometimes be overlooked and become original content. So the bottom line is this, is what makes your content original from your competitors. A lot of times when I look at affiliate sites, they are cookie cutters of their competitors and they're not covering anything original. So think about your expertise in that particular niche. What does your expertise add to differently the content that you are providing? Now, I know that your head wants to explode when I say something like that, because it sounds very expensive, and it sounds like, I know most of you are muttering under your breaths, I'm not an expert in pasta makers, but I am going to rank the site and make a ton of money on it. And I'm not saying you have to be an expert pasta maker. However, you need to appear that you are. So I understand website owners, and I understand people who own and build websites for profit. It exists. It's out there. I understand that not everybody is a real expert in these pasta makers or even pasta type recipes. However, you can appear to be, and in some really simple ways are your writers. Your writers should be known across the web at least a few times, like Carissa is, in that niche, and that's easy to do. Now, as we go through the update and my notes change on this, that is one of the items that I just talked about. How is your content original? That's something that I'm going to be diving into more later, because there are ways to include original content. And one of the easiest ways is, I talk a lot about onpage.ai, the entities tool. They do include with their tool some FAQs and statistics that they're grabbing that has not been shown across the web. And so that might be a fast solution for you. It might not be. There are other ways. I'm not saying you have to get the tool. I'm just saying it's included with that tool. And there are other tools that would probably help you in this area. So that's something that I'm going to need to focus on in another video, to give you more steps to be sure your content is original, or at least has a piece of original content within it. All right. So again, they talk about, did you fully cover your topic? But this time it's not talking about across the site, it's talking about on your page. Did you fully develop your topic? And what I'd like to think about in this area is entities. The reason I like to think about entities is because entities help you fully develop your content, because they will mention entities that you didn't even think of to include in your topic. Now, something else that they mentioned very subjectively in here is, are you keeping in mind our guidance for core updates and product reviews? What that says to me is, whatever they had in the core updates and the product review update, you better be paying attention, because they are paying attention within this helpful content algo update. So whatever has been said about the core updates and the product reviews that we need to do better, unfortunately, you're going to have to include that if you're trying to recover a site from the helpful content update. And I say unfortunately because this adds a lot more steps and it's very vague. So now we're doing a lot of things for the product reviews, the core updates, but it's good practice to make sure whatever we learn from the core updates and the product review updates, that you are carrying through that knowledge on any of your future sites and into your current site so that you are constantly not getting caught in any of those filters either. Now, they also gave us a list on what to avoid when you're creating your content. And they do say, make sure the content, or actually avoid making the content only for search engines or search engines first. Now, you can't get any more vague than that, but who is your audience? Have you clearly defined your audience? Do you have your audience in mind when you're creating this content? Is this content that they can fully understand your topic, or are they going to have to do 5 more searches to fully answer their question? So are they going to land on your site, read what you have to say, and then do 3 more of the exact same searches to continue to develop the topic? Or did you fully develop the topic? And again, we're talking about topical relevance, we're talking about topical authority, and we're talking about entities at the very basic level. And then they added this piece in again where it says, are you mainly summarizing what others have said? What is different on your site than what's on your competitor's site? You have to have a difference. Now, that is so vague and written so that everyone's going to understand this completely different. But compare your site to the top 3 spots. What is on your site that is different from theirs? Or is it completely just all of their content rehashed? So we are no longer competing to see who can do the best SEO and making our way to the top, beating out the 10 sites that have all of the information that is exactly like yours. But what do you bring to the table that's different? And how does a machine know that you have something different on your site than everybody else? That's what you need to think about when you're putting your content together. So again, what are the FAQs? What can you produce that's different from everybody else? What are the statistics? Do you have an opinion, or do you have an understanding that's different from everybody else? And what can you bring to magnify that that's different on your site? Now, that is super vague. All of us are going to do something different to make sure our content is different. But it's easy to keep in mind when you're reviewing your competitors. What is actually different on your site? Because most of the time when I take a look at sites, they are all cookie cutters of the exact same content, just rewritten. Now, we can argue at this point, and some of us have already started arguing about AI content. However, there are a lot of sites using AI content that are doing really well, and they're bringing in pieces that add value that is different from their competitors. So sometimes when the SEOs read some of these lines that say, are you adding value? How is it different? What's your expertise level? And they start reading through some of these, is it made for humans? They'll zero in and say, oh, this means you can't use AI. But that's not the same takeaway that I get when I read these. It just means you better be better at AI than only using what the AI is producing. And does your AI content meet the standards or the vague guidelines that they're giving us? That's how I would start to look at that piece. They go on to leave us a lot more vague items like, are you writing about things because that's your expertise level or that's your audience? Or are you just trying to rank for something because you know there's traffic? Now, that's super subjective, but as we go through this and in the coming months, that is probably a piece that I will focus on and produce a couple of steps to make sure that that is what the sites are doing. But it's written so vaguely that a lot of us are going to come up with different steps to that piece. And it means something different to all of us, right? To me, again, that talks about topical authority or topical relevance. Does your site show that you are experts in pasta makers or tech gear or whatever it is? Do you have the ability to write about that? And if so, why is that your ability? Why? You just need to tell them. And once you tell them that's not even good enough, you better make sure that Google search understands what you're an expert in. And that's not simply saying, I'm an expert because I made pasta for my entire life. You got to prove it through so that the machine understands Julia Ranella is indeed an expert in pasta makers because she wrote on, I don't know, 5 other food websites, or she has some type of experience with recipes, or food in general. And that is coming from the eyes of the bots. So it's not as we think it would look. It doesn't have to be someone that went to school for pasta making, graduated as a top chef. We're really overthinking it when we start to think that it has to have those types of implications. How will the bot know she is that pasta expert that she claims to be? Because when I search her name by myself, I don't really pick up that she's the expert on, well, anything other than her own site. Like I said, there are other ways to run these searches. You can definitely start searching with her name, searching with a niche type keyword to see if it pulls up something different. But that is going to be for another video. I just want you to know that it does go much deeper than this. Now, it was interesting to know that Google in the guidelines and things to avoid does say, are you rating content with a particular word count? Because Google doesn't care about the particular word count, which a lot of the SEOs have already said, including me. It doesn't have to hit a certain word count, but you have to cover the topic fully. You have to have all of the entities or the right entities or the main major entities. And that in itself will have a particular word count that's more than 300, 400 words, depending on what your topic is. But Google reminds us there's no particular word count. And I remember when in my SEO career where SEO started to say, we had, if it's 800 words, we had to write 800 words. And a lot of us started pushing back, thinking it couldn't be a simple word count. Perhaps in the beginning it was as simple as a word count, but now it's a lot more technical than that with machine learning, algo learning, unfortunately. All right, and then I'm going to read one more guideline that's really important in all of this. I've covered the main guidelines that I feel are the most important if you're dealing with a site that has been affected by the helpful content update. And then there's one more to note that's really, really important. And it is, does your content actually answer the question that it's supposed to answer? Now, they write it a little bit different than that. I just paraphrased it. But are you giving the reader what you promised to give them when they clicked through to your content? So how are you answering their question or answering their query? And their example of this is, are you suggesting there's a release of a date for a product or a movie or a TV show when one hasn't been confirmed? Or are you leaving that part out? Are you saying this is the date of the product that will be released, and then when we read your content, is that evident? Now, this is also taken a step further. There are SEOs out there that I like a lot and have a lot of good information, and they're saying not only did you answer the question, but hey, you better put it up at the top or at least within the first fold. Now, that goes a little bit deeper into this as well, and I don't want to make this an hour-long video, but are you actually answering what you promised to answer? Are you giving the end user the information that they're looking for, or are you leaving some of it out? Are you promising a date and not giving a date? Are you giving them pieces of the information but not fully what they need? Again, are they bouncing off of your site to run the same searches over and over to read other material because you've missed something critical? Or did you promise them information like, how long do you cook your pasta noodles? And then you didn't really fully answer that, or you answered it, but it's not clear that you've answered it. So what was the question, or what are you answering for the query? Are you answering it fully, or have you answered it vaguely? And is it apparent that you have answered it? And so some people have said, hey, I have like a question and answer section that just says, this is your answer, because they're trying to make it so upfront that yes, we answered the question and this is what it looks like. And then I've looked at other websites that yes, they do answer the question, but it wouldn't be clear to AI or to an algo learning machine that you actually did answer the question because of how you answered it. It was vague, or it was just kind of subjective, or I had to worked my way all the way to the bottom, and then I wasn't sure if you were quite answering it. So that is one of the things that we look for. Did you actually answer the question? How did you answer it? Did you answer it so that it just absolutely punches them, you know, in the algo so that they know without a doubt that has been answered? This is one of the newer content updates. And so it's going to take a lot of time before we have it dialed in so easily that we're able to just kind of flip the switch and get the sites to return. But what is equally frustrating about this particular update is that even when you've done everything right, they've said that it's still going to take you a few months, whatever that means, a few months, 2, 1, 3, 4, to actually recover. And again, it was written vaguely, in my opinion, so that if we've done everything right, we're still not going to be sure for a few more months. So if you've covered all of these questions and you've answered them with all of the points that I brought forth today, even if you've taken care of that site, so all of the points that I mentioned today, let's say you've combed through all of your content, you have redirected the topics you didn't fully cover, you have removed thin content, you have dialed in your writers a little bit better, you have made sure that they're recognized across the web as being experts in that particular niche, you have included original content, you have covered all of the steps that I've talked about in this video, you're still going to wait a few months, and we can argue about what a few months means before we start to see the green arrows or the rankings start to return or the traffic start to return. All right, I tried to cover this as thoroughly as I can, but as I covered this, I realized there are so many pieces to this that I've got to take deep dives into, and that's going to be done one video at a time. I know we were all chomping at the bit to get as much information as quickly as we can. However, if you don't understand what the update is looking for and you don't understand how the update is working, you won't understand how to apply what I've talked about today, and you won't be able to effectively change enough of the website to get it to return to its original rankings and traffic level. As always, drop any comments that you have below. I will either answer the comment or I will produce a separate video to fully answer. And I'll see you guys in the next video.